Welcome to our session. Today, we'll be talking about the pressures and stressors of teaching and how they can impact our own mental health, impacts that have intensified since the pandemic. More importantly, however, we hope to provide some tools and emotional supports to help you cope with these challenges today and in the future. Before we begin, though, let's introduce the team. I am Rachel Dirks, Director of Orchestral Studies at Kansas State University, where I also serve as applied cello instructor and string education specialist. Prior to my work at K-State, I spent 23 years teaching in the public school orchestra classroom.
Hi, I'm Blair Williams, Assistant Professor of String Music Education at Texas Tech University, where I also serve as the Director and a Master Teacher in the TTU String Project and co-conduct a local volunteer orchestra.
Hi, I'm Liz Dinwiddie, Director of the Carolina Community Arts Academy at Ashley Hall. Ashley Hall is an all-girls school in Charleston, South Carolina, and we have a community art school in the afternoons and weekends. I teach kindergarten through 12th grade strings in both group and private lesson settings.
And I'm Lindsay Fulcher, Assistant Professor of String Music Education and Area Head of Music Education at the University of Northern Colorado. I'm the Director and Master Teacher of the UNC String Project, and I also conduct the Campus String Orchestra. In addition to my plethora of responsibilities at work, many of which were added mid-pandemic, I also have a toddler, a first grader in online school, and a husband who works from home. As we pursued this topic of emotional supports, it was exciting to see the research that has been done and often confirms what we already know and feel. For example, Kimpton and Kimpton found that when teachers are overscheduled, overworked, and overstressed, these stressors impact our happiness, health, relationships, and professional practice. Does that ring true for anyone else? Sound a bit like the life you've been juggling, especially through the pandemic? Right now, we often don't feel we have the same control over our lives and work that we previously had. Going just a bit further into the research, we want to clearly define the 3 areas we'll be focusing on today as we discuss emotional supports. We hope you'll follow along on your handout and consider reading some of the research and resources for yourself. Burnout can be caused by high levels of stress experienced over longer periods of time. Teachers can experience this because they are asked to shoulder so many responsibilities, often at the same time. We're motivators, counselors, IT specialists, and oh yeah, teachers. Juggling all this at once can lead to burnout that can compromise teachers' physical and emotional well-being.
Education as a profession is basically the only social service that doesn't require, as part of its credentialing or ongoing credentialing process, some sort of way to process stress and trauma. Most police, fire, EMT agencies, if there's a death or a major traumatic event, they're at least required to do a couple hours of therapy to jump back on their rigs or get their gun and their badge back. Educators are expected to go for as long as 30 or 35 years with absolutely nothing to help us process stress and trauma. And we hold a lot of vicarious trauma for the students and families that we serve.
What's burnout? It's inability to deal with the stress, because the tolerance level has been exceeded. You're dealing with all the forces that work in a public school. It's a lot of stress, anxiety, and chaos that's coming at them, a lot of energy coming at them every day.
Secondary traumatic stress, or STS, can be found in teachers who work with traumatized students. When students bring their trauma to the classroom, teachers are at increased risk for traumatic symptoms themselves, hence STS.
So talking about secondary traumatic stress is really important. It's defined as the emotional duress that results when an individual hears about the firsthand trauma experiences of another. So really thinking about how we are emotionally impacted by the stories that we're hearing from our students, to understand how our histories can play a role in both our ability to connect with our students, but also the toll that it can play on us. So the types of problems that we might catch ourselves experiencing are things like nightmares or kind of intense feelings or persistent thoughts about our cases that we're working with, the students' stories, having a difficulty concentrating on our work, on even reading at home, suddenly getting irritable. That was one thing that I noticed in myself too. I was like snapping at people more than I would normally. Unhealthy avoidance. So really avoiding, our students sometimes, or calling, making that extra phone call home. We can feel numb inside and emotionally distant, or sad or guilty about not doing more.
STS risk factors include how much trauma a worker is exposed to, the type of work they do, their risk factors, and life experiences. STS can lead to significant distress and even post-traumatic stress disorder, a serious condition. To guard against STS, workers who are exposed indirectly to trauma must do what they can to take care of themselves.
And our third area of concern for teachers right now is compassion fatigue, or CF. CF is a mix of burnout and STS. Recent research that CF affects nearly 75% of teachers. Let me make sure you heard that. 75% of our profession is experiencing compassion fatigue. And that number actually came from research pre-pandemic. I would not be surprised if research today showed that number even higher. Without diligent care, CF will lead to feeling overwhelmed and out of control.
Compassion fatigue is what we experience when we feel like we can't care anymore or we can't care again. We become exhausted by the experience of caring, and we try to protect ourselves from caring too much. And compassion fatigue will often come because we feel helpless. When people are presenting us with pain, with challenge, with difficulty, and we can't help them, we can experience compassion fatigue. But again, I like to flip the script. Teachers come into this profession because they're helpers at their core, and they want to help, and that often means they want to fix whatever problem or challenge is presented to them. And I will say to teachers that the most important thing you do is you bear witness. You don't need to fix every problem. You don't always need to engage in action. You need to bear witness and be present with those who need you the most.
Before you start to explore emotional supports that you may need, it's advisable to have a good grasp of your level of burnout, secondary traumatic stress, or compassion fatigue. There are a number of quizzes online or through your healthcare provider that you can take to get a baseline assessment of your stress levels. We have found an informal, non-medical short quiz linked in our handout that you can check yourself for burnout related to your job. Please take a moment to click over to the quiz before continuing on with this session. have taken the quiz, we want to supportively encourage anyone who is in a category of severe risk of burnout to consider seeking the appropriate mental health care as needed. In the remainder of our session, we will provide suggestions to help move the needle towards balance, but we also acknowledge that we're musicians and teachers and not mental health professionals.
In navigating the emotional supports that we found in the research and that were provided by mental health specialists, we noted that many were connected, related, or overlapping in comforting ways. We have put together the word cloud you see here to help visualize those supports in the shape of a heart, so we all remember what is at the center of our personal and professional lives. Let's examine a few of these supports. How can you prioritize emotional supports within your day? How will you benefit from them? Service to others. We know that many of you are already serving others in a variety of ways that are many times wrapped into your job and activities in your community. However, finding a way to serve others that you may not encounter in your everyday life can open up your heart and mind in new ways. This past summer, a new colleague and I were tasked with putting together service opportunities for students participating in an international online chamber music camp. Some of the options that we presented for the students, my teammate and I also explored, and then we were able to share in our group the enthusiasm we felt for being able to give in these ways. It might be giving blood, it might be participating in the Kindness Rock Project, or even collecting socks for those in need in our communities. What are some ways that you could give back in your community that also brings you joy? Create connection to others. You could approach this support either in a musical or non-musical way. Recently, while watching Queen's Gambit, I had a conversation with my partner that included how one would feel meeting someone new and playing a game of chess in a park, or engaging in small talk in line at the grocery store. Perhaps some of these nuanced moments have been lost because of the devices in our pockets and purses. However, right now, those devices are our lifelines to family and friends that we have been unable to see in person for months. How are you creating connection to those you love and care about? What new avenues could you explore? Cultivate positive relationships. Seek out working and connecting with positive people who appreciate your time and work, energize and inspire you, and provide you with a comfortable and safe relationship, and where you can offer them the same. For example, the friendships I have with these ladies I'm presenting with today make presentations like this so much easier because our interactions are supportive, nurturing, and often inspiring. Make healthy nutritional choices. Keeping your body healthy helps keep your mind and soul happy as well. Now, we are not saying you can't have cake or other less healthy items every once in a while, but to keep your mind sharp, be a model to our students and communities, and to simply feel better for yourself, make nutritional choices that make your body happy. Prioritize healthy sleep patterns. For far too long, Americans have revered those who get less sleep. You may hear, "I am running on 3 hours of sleep." We wear it like a badge of honor. We all know that to keep our minds sharp, our creative juices pumping, and to be able to make the quick fire decisions that are needed in our profession, Our brain must be able to run clearly and efficiently. An appropriate amount of sleep will keep that brain tuned up and ready. Self-care. More than bath bombs or golf rounds, self-care is really about prioritizing yourself and your health. Of course, bath bombs and golf are fantastic. What are some ways you like to celebrate your interests and passions that are relaxing and rejuvenating for you? Consider incorporating those activities more often to monitor yourself and your needs. Set boundaries. Do you have a hard time saying no? One might feel responsible or guilty about not adding the requested event, activity, or project to your plate. But prioritizing the emotional supports above and others helps you to reprioritize your limited time. However, also knowing that emotional supports are individual and unique, what are one or two additional emotional supports that you would add in that small space at the bottom tip of the heart? Pause for a moment to take in each word and phrase presented and contemplate what word or words you would add to the image to make it your own. Notice that the emotional support that was the most permeating in all the research we gathered was set boundaries. Somehow, through the magic of computer algorithms, this phrase landed right smack dab in the middle of our little graphic. Makes sense. To establish healthy sleep patterns, we need to set boundaries about how many activities or responsibilities we take on. Adding to our work hours late into the evening or early in the morning. We must set boundaries to allow our brain the thinking time it needs to process and imagine creative products, and so on. Join us now as we watch a short clip from Brene Brown discussing boundaries.
So my question is big, B-I-G. What boundaries need to be in place for me to stay in my integrity and make the most generous assumptions about you? But generosity can't exist without boundaries, and we are not comfortable setting boundaries because we care more about what people will think, and we don't want to disappoint anyone. We want everyone to like us, and boundaries are not easy. But I think they're the key to self-love, and I think they're the key to treating others with loving kindness. Sustaining. You can't, nothing is sustainable without boundaries.
To determine what boundaries we need to begin implementing in our lives, Brene Brown shares the following lists to help us in her book, Dare to Lead. From the list on the slide, select 3 words that represent your most core values. Perhaps that was a difficult task. I sympathize. It's hard for us as well. But now the real work. Select only one from your list of 3 to represent your most core value. We will use that value to complete the next activity.
Now that you have identified several emotional support strategies, as well as your core value, it's time to merge the two to create a plan that is designed for your authentic self. First, reflect on your final core value word choice. Think about how you would connect that concept to some of the emotional support strategies listed above. For example, my core value is community. With that in mind, I have recently chosen emotional support strategies that allow me to build and strengthen the communities in my life. In my work, I collaborate with my students about ways we can strengthen our orchestra community, especially now when our rehearsal times together are very limited. In my personal life, I have found a way to merge my love of throwing pottery with my desire to give back to my local community. I now sell my finished pieces in support of different organizations, like a small business that is struggling, or the local food pantry that can't keep up with the current demand for their services. Utilizing the 3 new R's, routine, relationships, and resilience, as identified by turnaroundusa.org, I want you to take a moment to set some goals based on your reflections above. First, as you reflect on the emotional support strategies and your core value, write down one new strategy you would like to incorporate into your routine. Next, as you reflect on the positive relationships in your life, choose one relationship that you would like to nurture or strengthen. How will you begin that process? And finally, as you reflect on one particular challenge you are currently facing, whether at work or home, identify one new emotional support strategy that will help you respond to this challenge, thus offering you the chance to learn, grow, and become more resilient.
So far in this session, we have looked at the research on burnout, secondary traumatic stress, and compassion fatigue. We've focused in on self-assessment, reviewed emotional supports, and created a gratitude and goal-setting process. Finally, we want to zoom back out again to the big picture. You are likely in a community of teachers who are all well aware of the stressors you face, and acknowledging this or creating a culture of awareness is another strategy you can use. Peer groups can be so helpful in being able to navigate boundary setting and self-care. In our handout resources, we have included information about Trauma Aware Schools, which is a website that provides extensive resources for educators to utilize. We encourage you to continue to be self-aware of how stress, trauma, burnout, and compassion fatigue are affecting you. This can be done through self-assessments similar to the one we did earlier in this session.
We know that teachers are under an incredible amount of stress. Now more than ever, we are at increased risk for burnout, secondary traumatic stress, or even compassion fatigue.
Without identifying and implementing emotional supports that fit who we are and what we need, the stressors we continue to face will become increasingly problematic.
Make sure to take time to reflect on your personal core values and how you can embrace a healthier lifestyle by focusing on activities that bring you peace and make you happy.
You may have to create some boundaries in your life to make time and space for you, but it will be worth it.
And don't forget to nurture those positive relationships with friends, family, and colleagues, for we never do anything alone.
And finally, Winnie the Pooh said it best. You are braver than you seem, stronger than you believe, and smarter than you think. Be brave, be strong, and know that you are a treasure to so many.